on camera.
Okay.
So good morning.
Good morning.
It's 10:30 on Thursday, February 13th, 2020. I'm Kalinda Lee, Vice President for Historical Interpretation and Community Partnerships at the Atlanta History Center. And I'm here with Sue Verhoff, who's the Director of the Atlanta History Center's Oral History Program. And we are conducting an interview with Miss Pat Westrick, who has agreed very graciously to be interviewed as part of our partnership with the Inman Park Neighborhood Association. Thank you for that, and good morning.
Welcome. Good morning.
So let's begin at the very beginning.
Okay.
You were born in Florida, I
I
understand?
was born in Cleveland, Ohio.
Ah, so you've lived a number of places.
Yes. I was born in Cleveland. My parents moved in 1949 to St. Petersburg, Florida. I think of that as sort of the big Midwest migration south after the Depression, after the war, when those sorts of things kept people from doing much. Then I think my dad was tired of shoveling snow, and they decided they wanted to be where it was warm. And so we moved to St. Petersburg, and that's where I grew up.
And now you've been in Atlanta for decades.
Since 1974.
So can you tell us a little bit about what brought you here to Atlanta and why you chose to stay?
Richard was in the Navy. We got married in 66. He was drafted in 60, or was going to be drafted in 67, and so he joined the Navy. And we were stationed in Charleston and lived in like one floor of a Victorian house on Colonial Lake in Charleston. And it sort of started our appreciation of old houses. And we went from there to Norfolk, Virginia, and then he was discharged and he decided to go back to college. So while he was in the Navy, he learned data processing, which in those days was like very new and very exciting. And he decided to go to Florida Atlantic University, which is a 2-year, like junior and senior year. He graduated from Florida Atlantic and then got a job at C&S Bank in Atlanta. So I remember looking at the map of Atlanta that, I don't know, trust company or somebody had sent us. And I said, Richard, I'll never learn my way around this town. Look at how big it is. I mean, it was just this giant, nothing but roads. But we ended up in an apartment on Beaufort Highway. And Richard commuted, took Marta to work. And he's the one that discovered Inman Park. He said, I found the old neighborhood. I found a neighborhood with old houses in it. But we, as people do, we had 2 kids, and we decided we wanted to buy a house. And we looked at houses in Decatur and Virginia Highlands and Morningside and finally Inman Park. And that was the only place we could afford. So we bought a triplex on Sinclair Avenue. The ceilings had been lowered. Half of the porch had been closed in. It had asbestos siding, and it came with a side lot. So there'd been a house next door that burned, and apparently they had bought that property. So the main house was divided in 2, so it was a bungalow. And so that was 2 units, and then there was an apartment that had been tacked on the back, and that was the 3rd unit. And it was $25,000. And we bought it with a VA loan, and so we didn't even have to put any money down. And we moved in, and we still had like a tenant, and my mom decided it was time to move from California, and she said, I'm coming. They just raised my utility bills, honey. I'm on my way. So she moved into the little apartment in the back, and we got our our tenant's lease expired, and we took over the whole house and tried to figure out how to make it back into a house again. So we were there from 1975 to 1991. Bought our second house in 1990. And that also had tenants. There's a theme here. That also had tenants, and we decided that we had made it a condition of the contract that the tenants be gone when we bought the house. Jean and Elizabeth said they've got, these kids are med students. They've got leases. They don't want to leave because they'll have to find, it's the middle of the semester. They don't want to leave. And so I said, in a year, those people are going to be gone, and we're not going to own that house. I think we need to just go ahead and take that contingency out of the contract, and we'll buy the house, and we'll have tenants for a year, which we did. And we spent the year planning what we were going to do to that duplex. That one had a carriage house in the back with 2 units in it, so that was 4 units total. We figured out how to put that house back together and moved into it in 1991. And now we're in our 3rd house.
So I have a few.
It's not a duplex.
So I have a few questions for you about
Okay.
your homes. When you bought the first house, that was 3 units, did you always have intention to make it a single family home? Was it always your plan to do major renovations and to make it a single family home?
I think that really gives us too much credit. I don't think we had a clue what we were doing. We didn't know the first thing. It was a product of getting to know other people in the neighborhood and seeing what they were doing. I mean, we knew there wasn't enough space for us in half that house. We had 2 kids. We were pregnant within a month of moving. And so we were shortly to have 3 kids. And obviously there wasn't enough space there. So we looked at what other people were doing, and we said, well, we can do that. We can do that. I remember coming back from maybe Bill and Marnie's on Alta, and I noticed that they had pocket doors. And I said, Richard, do you think maybe we've got pocket doors somewhere? He said, well, we don't have them now. So the tenant, I guess the tenant had moved next in the unit next to us. I said, let's sneak over there and let's just see. So we got her with what was set up as the living room and her bedroom, which was really should be in the living room and the dining room, had this big wide doorway, and I said, yes, look, maybe they're there. And we pried off the big 2x4 that was the 1x8, I guess it was, that was closing that wall off. There wasn't anything back in there, but you could see that there really had been. So then, one thing leads to another. So then we were like on a hunt for pocket doors that we could put in. We could replace the ones we had with. It was just it was a process. We didn't have enough brains to know what we were doing, but it all kind of, one thing followed another.
So then you moved to this second house, which you bought in 1990. First of all, would you mind sharing the address for that house?
177 Elizabeth Street. It was the first house on the block. It was built in 1890. It was, so there was so it's next to the Hurt Mansion, which was not there when this house was built. And there's a photograph of the house that looks like it's out on a prairie. No trees, just the house all by itself on the yard. And that had been that was in a calendar that was in one of the Emmett Park calendars from 1978. I think it was 1978. And it was a calendar full of old pictures of houses in the neighborhood, and that was on the. And I'd always loved that picture, and then to have the house be ours was really kind of cool.
I'll bet. So, why did you move?
That's a question our son asked. We had renovated the Sinclair house. We'd taken the porch back to, it was supposed to have been the front parlor or the music room. We took that back, and we got the porch back, and all of that we had done. We did the kitchen, we had a screen porch, and the kids had grown up. I mean, Jenny, the youngest, was still in high school. Mary Catherine was at Emory, and Rich was graduating that year from high school, and he was getting ready to start Georgia. Actually, in 91, he started Georgia Tech. And so we came home, and I said, we're buying a new house. And Rich said, you people must be crazy. You just finished this house. I said, I've always wanted a Victorian, honey. This is like I've always wanted a 2-story Victorian, and now I have one. Yeah, fine, Mom. So we, I forget what the question was. What was the question, Kalinda?
I was just asking why you moved.
Why we moved. That was it. I mean, and I was a real estate agent, so temptation was there all the time. I mean, because I would get in and see these houses and go, man, that's a great house. I'd love to have that house. So it really didn't make any sense, but we did it.
So why'd you move again?
Well, I think that's probably governed by my niece. We had, I mean, it was a big house. And by that time, we moved in 2016. We knew we had to downsize. I mean, it's just, the kids are gone. They came home with their kids. So they were all married. They all we had grandchildren. We had children, grandchildren. And they would come home sometimes for Christmas, always for festival, and everybody would come. And sometimes even before we'd go to the beach. So we had a full house, but it was only like 3 or 4 times a year. And we just couldn't justify keeping the house. It was hard to get up the stairs now. It was going to get harder. It was time to downsize. So I kind of kept my eyes on smaller houses in the neighborhood. And someone called me to say, we're getting ready to move. I just wanted to let you know the house is going to be on the market. And I knew this house. And I said, don't do anything yet. I said, can I come over and see it? No, well, the nanny's there with the twins. Sure, you can. Yeah, I'll tell her. I'll call her and tell her. So I went over to take a look at it, and I went, I think this one could work. There's like 4 steps up to the front door, and there's a couple of steps in the backyard, and there's 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and a place for an office. And I think this one could work. So that was the downsize house. But we couldn't leave the neighborhood.
So you anticipated my next question.
Which was?
So you've told me about 3 moves,
Mm-hmm.
but you're staying in Emmett Park.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because it's home. I mean, Richard and I were talking about this last night. There's neighbors. So, I mean, everybody has neighbors. And everybody knows how nice that is. But there's also community, and that's what we have. It's the sense that even if you don't know somebody well, they're still a part of your community. And so we have friends, we have close friends, and we have neighbors who we're close to, but we have this greater community, and there's a sense of sharing what we experience there. And I don't know how to describe it better than that. It's, I don't know. Part of it's festival. Part of it is just our having grown together in that neighborhood and having such close relationships. We don't want to leave if we don't have to.
So as we're thinking about that community, you've talked about a lot of phases of your life that happened in that community and with those people. And one thing that you've referenced is your children. So you raised children in Inman Park. Can you share a little bit about that? Like what kinds of activities, the schools they attended? What was that like? And when was it?
Mary Catherine was born in 1970, so she was 5 when we moved in. Rich was born in 73, so he was 2. I think I've got a photo. I've got a snapshot of him in the front yard before we moved in, where the grass is up to here. He's like walking through the front yard, and the grass is up to here. We did when we were taking over the whole house and kind of renovating and trying to put things back together. He was being potty trained about that time. He's going to love this story. And everything was so turned upside down. And of course, we hadn't done anything to the bathroom. It was still there. But he came out, with this like fidgeting, and he said, "Where's the toilet?" It was still in the same place. But everything had been so moved around. Jenny was born in that house. She was born in 1976. So they grew up there. It was a different experience for each one of them because of the differences in their ages. Mary Catherine, as the oldest, there were two other girls her age. So there was Jessica McLaughlin and Julie Webb, and they were on the other side of the neighborhood. So in order to play with them, she had to cross what we used to call the DMZ, which is now Freedom Park. So it was always sort of, be careful, don't talk to anybody, don't stay on your bike, go straight to Julie's house, and then come straight home. Call me from Julie's house when you're leaving, and let me know you're coming home. So it was always these sort of, because you never knew. Because there were no neighbors there. That was all just grass. And we knew if there were neighbors there, they were safe. So for Mary Catherine, there weren't very many kids. In those days, there really weren't very many kids. Because, stop and think about who was there, who was settling, who was moving into these old neighborhoods. And in the 70s, it was gay guys, because they had vision, and they had, they kind of got it when they looked at these wonderful houses. They saw what could happen. And there were a lot of young people, either singles or couples, but nobody had quite gotten around to having kids yet. And then we moved in with these kids, and there just weren't that many around. There were some kids down the street. There was let's see, Keith, and there was another little girl that Mary Catherine would play with, and they were just they were different. We had kids next door, and they were from, let me try and figure out how to say this. They were from families that had been there a longer time. And so the families that were there were working class, which isn't to say we weren't, but they were it was really their neighborhood when we moved in. It was more rental and more folks who were content to live in the houses without changing them, who maybe were renting the houses, who were, they were dear people, most of them. They were, Buford down the street was a plumber. Richard loves this story, he used to tell it. And he would literally go on a toot when he went out and got drunk. He would come home and sit in the front, pull into the front yard and hit the horn so that his wife could come out to whatever it was he needed. She would bring him. I mean, it was sort of like, oh, Buford's on a toot again. Just, I mean, they would park in the front yard. There were things that they would do that we would just never think of doing. They would park in the front yard. They would, but they were, I mean, the woman that lived next door to us on the right, she's looking at the house, really wasn't too sure she wanted her kids to play with our kids. I mean, it was just, she was very careful with her kids. And it was a different socioeconomic strata, I guess. The woman at the corner, this is all on Sinclair, the woman at the corner had 2 or 3 kids, or maybe 4, and she couldn't read. So she would come over and ask me to read things for her if her kids weren't home. Her sister was Crazy Louise. Do you remember Crazy Louise? Yep, street. She was homeless and would just kind of wander around. And it turned out later that she wasn't really that crazy. She just needed glasses. So when we saw her, she would come by and ask if I had a cup of coffee. I always give her a cup of coffee. And she was the sister of the woman that lived on the corner. And next to her, next to that house, was a pit. And that had been a house that had burned down. So that was a vacant lot. The woman on the corner then had chickens. I'm just remembering this. She had chickens, and every once in a while they would get into our yard, in the side yard. And Richard was out there mowing one day, and this chicken came jumping out of the grass. It's like weird. So there weren't many kids. Rich had a different experience. So he had some buddies who were this kind of this in that group, and they were they were great. They were all good buddies. Jenny didn't have as many friends. She and Jane Bradshaw were of an age, but until they got older, they really didn't see eye to eye about a lot of things. So when they were in preschool, they were all in what was then MCDC Montessori, so Montessori Child Development Center. And as each of them got to that age, they went to the Montessori. And then when it was time for grade school, I went ahead and enrolled them in St. Thomas More in Decatur. Because at the time, the grade school for Inman Park was Moreland Elementary. And it was a tough school. And I know Julie went there, and I think Jessica went there. But I just wasn't comfortable sending Mary Catherine there. So when they started out they were at St. Thomas More. When it came time for high school, they all went to what is now Arbor Montessori, and then excuse me, and then to St. Thomas More, and then from there, we really thought about sending Mary Catherine to Grady, but she was thinking at the time about medicine, and they didn't have a particularly strong science program. So we decided to go ahead and send her to St. Pius. So she went to St. Pius, and then when Rich came along, I thought, I am not sending this boy to Grady. So they all went to St. Pius. And so that's the school story.
So now your children are adults.
They are.
And you mentioned that they come back for festival.
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember your first Inman Park Festival?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Tell us about it.
I was pregnant with Jenny, massively pregnant with Jenny, because Jenny was born in May and that was April. Jenny was born in late May and that was late April. The reason, and both of us, both Richard and I, volunteered, and the only reason we did is because Kathy Sanders, who at that time lived on Colquitt, Kathy used to own Jan's house. Kathy Sanders came to us and said, "You need to volunteer for festival." Okay. I mean, we didn't know anything about any of this. We didn't know what festival was. We had missed the festival the year we bought the house. And so this would have been 1976. And she said, "Yes, you have to volunteer." Okay. So I sold, I guess I was, so in those days, what was IPR then, in Park Restoration, and is now IPNA, they had their own booth and they sold, I guess people donated I don't know, old furniture and objects, and and so we had like a sales booth that we sold antiques and things from, and so I volunteered for that. And I was so massively pregnant that people would say, "Are you okay, dear?" I said, "Fine." But we and Richard threw garbage. He was on trash detail, and he has been ever since. I just remember it as kind of a blur, and thought, this is fun. This is fun. And then the next year, of course, we found out about Butterfly Ball. You know about Butterfly Ball? Butterfly Ball is sort of the neighborhood's prom. We work hard to put on festival, and so the Friday night before festival, under the tent, we all got dressed up, and we have like a catered dinner, and dance, and all of that, and it was really fun. Guys, a lot of guys in tuxes, a lot of women in long dresses, and so our first Butterfly Ball then was in 1977, where I had to leave and go home and nurse Jenny. Marnie and I had to leave because Jenny was born in May and Austin was born in August, and my mom babysat for the kids. Then we've been going to Butterfly. I don't think we've missed a Butterfly Ball since then. We still go. It's like, we really want to go to Butterfly Ball again? Oh yeah, kids don't care if we're there. Let's go. So that Butterfly Ball, Saturday night used to be the Saturday night dance, and we had a DJ and records, and it was not fancy, and again under the tent, and we would all come and dance. So it was great fun. I don't know why we stopped doing that. So that's not, now Saturday night is theater night. So those are early festival memories.
So you've been playing a role in the festival consistently.
Not as consistently as Richard did, because when I stayed home with the kids, and it wasn't until the kids were kind of on their own that I could take more time and volunteer. Probably 1987 is when I jumped into it. I don't remember when we started doing house tour. On and off. We were on tour. Actually, we were on tour in 87. Is that after we finished the house? No, we were on tour in 81 before we took over the front room, before we expanded put it back together. And then we were on tour again in 87 after the house was finished, after the Sinclair house was finished. And then 2002 on Elizabeth Street. We can't be on tour on Ashland because we're full of kids, full of kids, in-law kids and grandkids. No place to put anybody.
So what roles do you play now with festival?
With festival,
Mm-hmm.
I am co-chairing the Festival 50 committee. So the committee that's getting ready for the 2021 festival, which will be the 50th festival. So Alex Cronemeyer and I are on that, are co-chairing that committee and trying to make sure we've got enough things pulled together that will commemorate the 50th festival. So that's currently what I'm doing. Plus, what else do I do? I sell house tour tickets from the house before festival, sell pre-sale tickets from the house, which we've been doing for, I don't know, 10 years maybe. I'm on the committee. I just kind of hang out and, help wherever I'm needed.
So I've been to festival a few times in Inman Park.
You need to come every year.
And it seems like to me that community now looks very different than the way you describe your earliest memories.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the evolution of festival. Who comes? How do neighbors participate? How's it evolved?
Festival has evolved into, it's interesting trying to communicate to new neighbors what festival means. Because for a lot of them, when we moved in because we really couldn't afford to be anyplace else. That was pretty much, and then and we together joined in we didn't create the community, but we joined into the creation of this community. People who buy in Inman Park now, many of them buy because they want to be in that location. And because it's a good, the houses appreciate it's just, and we've got so many amenities that we didn't used to have, and so there's that category of people. Then there are people who buy because they want to be in Inman Park. They like the history of it. They like the old houses. They like the feeling of community. And then there are people who just somehow stumble on it. And so the challenge is to bring them all in. The challenge is to communicate to them what it all means and why it's important. Because the way the neighborhood views it and has viewed it all along is this is a party for us. We invite everybody to come because we love what we have and we want to share it. But really, it's what unites us. It's this common sense of purpose that every year we do this sort of magical thing I always think of it like Brigadoon, because you go out, you know, Saturday and Sunday, and there's all these people, and the booths, and the entertainment, and the food, and the beer, and all of that. And then Monday morning, it's gone. It's all gone, and it's like it was never there. But to try to communicate this, so we try to share it with the city, and then try to communicate to the newcomers why it's important that they take part in it. So there are, I would say, upwards of 800 to 900 volunteers who help put on festival. Nobody gets paid. We don't have any professionals other than the vendors and the folks that are there to sell things. But in terms of its organization and its structure, it's all volunteer, and it has been all along. And so it's special for us because it's part of what unites us. It's part of that common purpose that we're able to share with everyone else. Got to come every year. I'm just saying.
So in this vein, I have one more question. Mm-hmm. And it sort of has to do with the park, the festival, but it also has to do with the neighborhood association. And you've talked about this progression of the neighborhood to this space where it's kind of known for restored homes and known for festival and all, but you set up a situation or an understanding, a picture, where originally it sounds like those were exceptions, that it was mainly the neighborhood of renters, mm-hmm. In the neighborhood of kind of Victorians that had once been grand, but were chopped up at that time. So it certainly could be a narrative of progress. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if there's anything that you miss or you feel wistful about from the early days.
A little bit, but not much, because that's still there. All of the kind of feeling of sharing in a community is all still there. What I wish there were more people who'd been, I wish there were more people who'd been there early that we could reminisce with. Jan and I in the car coming here, talking about some of the people and we have had some crazy folks in the neighborhood. I mean, it's our friend Bob Bottomer, who no longer lives in the neighborhood, but still feels like he does. It still comes and volunteers at festival. Famously said, "It's hard to be odd in Inman Park," because we're kind of quirky. I mean, we're not very cookie cutter, and we've had some really strange neighbors, but it's okay because they're ours and sort of. But I wish there were more people I wish that more people had known those quirky neighbors in the old days.
Does it feel like a little less quirky with the newcomers?
You know, it really doesn't. We'll lose somebody and somebody else will just rise up and take their place. Just when you think we've gotten really, really sort of, I don't know, cookie cutter, no. Mm-mm. There's always room for strangeness.
So we've talked about festival mm-hmm. as one of the major activities mm-hmm. That neighbors have united to produce. But I know that Inman Park neighbors are engaged in many other kinds of tasks and even struggles together. And one of those has to do with zoning issues.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us why that's so important for Inman Park?
I think it's important for everyone in Atlanta. I think that somehow Inman Park's been blessed with folks who've had a great amount of foresight and saw some of the challenges that I think I don't want to know some of the challenges that the entire region are experiencing. Just saw those before that happened, and part of it I think is the highway property. The fact that before we were a neighborhood, or before we were a late 20th century neighborhood, we've always been a neighborhood, that it was okay to tear down, I don't know, 500, 800,000 houses to build a highway, 2 highways. So we lost a huge chunk of our housing, and when the Presidential Parkway was threatened to come through, that was just another challenge, and that was the beginning, I think, of, or a continuation of concerns about trying to the extent that's possible in a city, trying to take hold of our own destiny and to control how our land was used, and to continue the neighborhood character that we had. And I think we were able to do that because of and I've always said, the accident of who came to live in our neighborhood. We had the benefit of so much brain power and so much talent that when we needed these people, they were there. I mean, Robert Griggs, who bought the house at 866 Euclid and was he was the daddy of Inman Park restoration. It was founded in his living room, I'm pretty sure, which I've always heard was July 4th. So that was so I always think of that as the neighborhood's birthday. But Robert Griggs, Kathy Bradshaw, good Lord, what would we have done without Kathy? Sally Dorn, who was the brains behind, or was one of the brains behind the challenge to the Parkway. Richard Ossoff, Al Caproni. I mean, these are people who, we've just had so much talent, and consequently, as each kind of zoning challenge came up, they were able to step in and help us figure out how to meet it. Sometimes we won and sometimes we didn't. I think that I think there are 2 things that stand out. Regina Brewer's another one that, thank God we have her. 2 things that stand out as key. One is historic zoning. If we hadn't had historic zoning, I don't think the neighborhood would ever have retained the character it's retained. And the second one is the planning that went into Inman Park Village, which was another combination of really good circumstances.
Tell us a little bit more about that. What was the planning that went into Inman Park Village?
Inman Park Village used to be the Mead paper plant. So it was on Lake Avenue. It was a huge parking lot, and then set back there were like warehouses, I think. Seems like they were warehouses. And it wasn't, they didn't make paper there, but I think it was a distribution center. And I mean, a lot of Inman Park was industrial. there was a steel plant, again, they didn't manufacture it, but it was on the railroad tracks, and that was on the other side of North Highland. And they sort of, I guess, transported it from there. Again, distribution. There was the Our Way Motor Company at the corner of Elizabeth Street and Lake Avenue, which is now Inman Quarter. And so that was all very industrial. I'm trying to remember, there were 2 houses on Elizabeth Street across from Our Way, and then the strip like a little commercial strip, which had, where the Albert is now. What was the name of that bar before the Albert? That'll pop into my brain again. Just like Rudolph Bird did earlier. And then on the corner of Elizabeth and North Highland, there was a mechanic, maybe. And then next to that, some office buildings that had downtown properties in it. So Meade, all of that was kind of in flux. Meade decided that they no longer needed this distribution center, and they were going to put the property on the market. They'd always been pretty good neighbors. Other than the big trucks that would come down Lake Avenue and shake those little bungalows, they'd always been pretty good neighbors. They used to let us park there for festival. They were, nice people. And instead of just putting the property on the market, they instructed their broker to find out what the neighborhood wanted there. And I was planning VP, God, at that time. And we had just had a big kind of quarrel with the 4th Ward about the apartment house, Highland View, the apartment house just on the other side of the bridge. And so it was just in the 4th Ward, but it was just before you got into Inman Park. And for some reason, we felt like that was too dense for that property. That had been again, another mechanics thing. And we were told by the 4th, this is right after I took office, the 4th Ward said, this really isn't in Inman Park. We don't really care what you think. So, okay, well then. We realized that we didn't know exactly what we wanted. And so we started kind of putting together a vision for what we might. I said, we really need to be planning. We really need to have an idea. And right about that time, Meade came to us and said, we're putting the property on the market and we want to know what you guys want there. That was after, so that would have been 2001 maybe. It was after the Beltline had been talked about. Debbie Starnes was our city council person. She lived then and lives now at the corner of Edgewood and Spruce. And Debbie put together a task force trying to figure out what to do with what was going to be very soon an abandoned rail corridor. And so what she wanted to do was come up with a plan for that, what everybody expected to be the Beltline at some point. What are the things we want? What are the things we want? What are the guidelines for development? And it was a number of people from all around the city, or all around District 2, who were on that committee. So we had that was sort of a template, and we had formulated already. Regina Brewer was Historic Preservation Vice President. I was planning. I don't remember who was zoning at that time. Might have been Tamara Jones, and we had already formulated what we thought our historic zoning regulations would look like. And we had worked with Bill Kennedy who had been with the city, and Bill was working with us as a consultant, and we had come up with 3 sub-areas. So there was sub-area 1, which was the kind of historic part of Inman Park. Sub-area 2, which was the DeKalb Avenue corridor, which was very different in character. It was a lot of small business, some industrial, restaurants sort of things. And then sub-area 3, which was the rail corridor, which is what is now the Beltline. And so we took that as kind of our jumping off point, and we took those almost as though they were already law, which they weren't. But Ruth Wall made up a packet, which she's so good at doing, and we set up a committee. So I tried to find people from different disciplines. We wanted an engineer, we wanted an architect or two, we wanted people who kind of had different areas of expertise. Danny Feig was on it, Bo, Joe Castellano, Ruth, of course, and we set up a committee, and I went back and looked at my notes, and we found out the property was going on the market in September. By December, we had a buyer. So between September and December, we interviewed every developer who was thinking about bidding on the property or was bidding on the property. And I think it was about 8 to 10 guys. And so I would call the committee and I'd say, all right, we got somebody who wants to give us a presentation. And we always met in Danny's office. Danny's was Small Carpenters at Large. He had an office on Lake Avenue. And they had a copy of what we wanted, and they would present their little, their design and their proposals, and we would ask them questions, and we would give them feedback, and we would discuss it and make decisions about it. Not thinking, we'd been given this opportunity, but they were under no obligation to sell to the people we thought were best suited for the property. We knew we wanted single-family houses across the street from the houses on Lake Avenue. That was really important. We wanted density, because that's important. We wanted so as you left Lake Avenue and moved toward North Highland, we wanted higher height, bigger height, and more density. We wanted shops, so we wanted mixed use, and that was pretty much it. We had a height of 58 feet as a maximum height, and we chose that because the architects pointed out that Copenhill, which had just been built, the Copenhill Lofts, was 58 feet, and that was the height of most mature trees. So we thought it needs to be it doesn't need to go up higher than that. We don't need high rises, but we need, you need density. You have to have height for density. So we ended up with the people that we liked the best, and we probably had a second and third choice. I don't even remember. And the broker called. Seems like it was Christmas. It was like Christmas season. And he said, Meade wants to know who you prefer. And I said, you're kidding. No, they want to know who you... I said, okay, well, these are the people we think are the best. And these are the people that kind of check all the boxes. Okay, that's who they sold it to. And the trade-off on that was that we worked with them then to refine the plan, and we then were partners in their application. We weren't formally partners, but we helped them get it through the city because it was what we wanted. And it was, and I think still it's a good design. I think those houses on Lake Avenue have, and we worked with the neighbors were all involved in this. We had meetings with the neighbors. So what we could give them in return was very little opposition to what they were doing in our agreement to help it get it through the city. So, water break.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, this is, I think you're so right. This is a persistent concern in many places in the city, and what you shared is a really interesting blueprint about how communities might go about having a meaningful voice in that process. I'm going to jump ahead some to talk about now and looking forward.
Mm-hmm.
What do you imagine for the future of Inman Park? What do you think will happen, and what might you like to happen?
I'd like to say the same. I'd hate to see it lose what it has. And what it has is that sense of community. In my heart of hearts, I'd like to see some sort of senior facility. Because we really, really don't want to leave. There are a bunch of us who are trying to figure out how to make that happen. Trying to find, there's no land. With very little, there's very few opportunities. But, you're kind of looking at some of the apartment houses and thinking, how could that be retrofitted so that we could all stay together? We just don't want to leave. So, looking forward, I hope that the quirkiness will stay. I hope that the community, that the sense of community stays, and that the houses, that the houses stay preserved and keep improving.
You are a fount of information. I could talk to you forever. But I'm mindful that our time is drawing to a close for this session at least. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you feel is very important to add that you haven't had an opportunity to add, that you haven't been asked.
I can't think of anything I haven't talked about. I don't know. I really don't think there's any. I'm sure I'll think of something as soon as I leave, but no. I don't know. God, we've got such. There's so many people that we could describe and that we could talk about who've had such an impact on this neighborhood. It's, God, that would be an interesting, to kind of talk about the ones who are gone and what they did and what they added. It would just be an interesting exercise, because they're not around to tell their stories anymore. But I think I've said plenty.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. So much.
It has been. It's been kind of fun. It's a little daunting.
Thank you so much. And we are